Hey,
Hi, Kino. How are you?
I'm good in yourself.
I'm doing well. It's so nice to finally be able to be together and talk. So this is nice.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
COVID, have you recovered?
I have. Yes. It was terrible. I didn't think, I know that COVID's still around, but I didn't think it was as prevalent as it still is. So, when I took the COVID test and it was positive. It made a lot of sense. And my mom, who works in the healthcare field, she's a very big advocate for wearing masks, kind of distancing and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad. It was a lot worse than I expected. So, I wanted to, just kind of take the time I needed to rest because I had felt a little bit burned out too, with a lot of projects going on. So I think I was really pushing myself, and you're around people a lot of the time, so you don't really know who is carrying what, and sometimes people are not honest about what they're
Yeah.
carrying. So
Yeah.
but I feel a million times better. I love when I can work. I'm like such a hard worker and I'm always going. So when I can't do that, it drives me nuts. I hate sitting in bed. I hate, not being able to do what I love to do every day.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like we don't give ourselves like a timeout, even though we know we're
Yes.
supposed to. It's like we just continue going, and then we like just burn out, we fall down, and we tell ourselves, okay, the next time I'm gonna give myself a timeout, or next year I'm gonna give myself a timeout. But it never
Yeah.
happens until you're in the bed again. And you're like,
Right.
okay, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I
Yeah.
can
And I
relate to
think
that.
you can relate to that for sure because working in the entertainment industry in any capacity, it's a competitive field. You want to be able to give 100% of yourself. But something I'm learning this year that I've been implementing is to take the time for myself. Still a work in progress, but I'm learning to allocate time for myself, for my family, and to kind of learn that the word no is a complete sentence. So if somebody asks me to do, a show or something to do with songwriting, producing, if I'm just overwhelmed, not only is that stressful for me, but that's going to show up in your work and that's going to present
Yeah.
itself to other people. And people are going to pick up on that energy of you're not 100% there. And you want to be able to give 100% of yourself to the client you're working for and to people that expect 100%.
Yeah. My guest last night my time, I brought up an author. His name is Robin Sharma. I'm not sure if you ever heard of him or came across any of his books or content. So,
I have not.
yeah.
No.
So one of the things that he says as a producer, not just like a music producer, but like a producer in society, no matter what you may be producing, he says our best creativity comes when we're actually doing nothing. And that
That's
hit
so
me.
true.
That hit me. So when we're on the grind day after day, we think that we're actually giving out our best, but we're actually not. But we're actually just like, take a few steps back, relax a bit, just do nothing, like completely nothing. That's when another idea just pops up, like, cool, that's the solution for that. And I get like,
Absolutely.
when you're saying how the industry is so competitive, especially with regards to technology, the innovations that's happening each and every single day, you can be busy with a project, but then something pops up tomorrow and you're like, okay, now I need to keep my eye on that. So now you're
Yes.
multitasking current versus what's like already being implemented already. And now you need to put that into your schedule as well. And before you get to that, something else pops up. And that's just the era we're living in.
It is. It is the era we're living in. I can speak for myself, and I kind of have my hands in everything because I'm such a control freak. So I want to be able to control every aspect of the creation process. And sometimes it's okay to let other people do what they do best and take a step back because, like you said, those are the moments when your best work comes out. And,
Yeah, yeah,
with all this technology coming out, with AI, with all this stuff, something I always tell artists if I'm working with them and with what's mainstream in popular music, that was created a year ago, 2 years ago. That is not going to be what's relevant when you release your music and you're starting the creation process, and it takes 6 months to a year to get your work delivered. You have to just create from the heart, as cliche as that sounds, because if you're trying to, I hear from so many artists, they'll say, um, uh, I worked with a male artist who said, I want to do music like The Weeknd. I'm a huge fan of The Weeknd. I think he's a phenomenal singer. The music is incredible, but that's his identity. That's his story. That's his work. And that's his truth. You have to come into the music industry with your own truth. We all have our
yeah, yeah.
experiences to tell. And those are the things that connect with audiences more so than trying to be this thing because you think that's the blueprint of success.
It's like you have to be the first you, not the second someone else.
Yeah, and it's funny.
Yeah.
I was getting ready today, and I always listen to music in the morning. I love, music that kind of gets you going and makes you dance. And I was listening to Lady Gaga. Again, I'm a huge fan of Lady Gaga.
Yeah, yeah.
She's and I started because I was listening to her first and second record, The Fame and The Fame Monster, and I realized that why it was so successful was because she did something at that time that nobody else was doing. Nobody else was producing and putting out and writing music that was dance pop with a twist on it. It was like this 80s Bowie glam rock mixed sound. And, the story behind that was that her record label was not originally supportive of that sound. And she advocated for herself to say, no, this is my sound. I'm not changing it. If I'm going to be mainstream and make pop records, whether they're sexy pop records, they're going to be done with a twist. There's going to be some humor in it, and there's going to be a stamp of identity in that. And that's something that I feel is missing in the current music scene. I I've heard an artist recently, Chapel Roan, is somebody that to me is so original, reminds me a lot of Gaga in the sense that when she came out, she's just this fun, dynamic force. She's exciting to
Yeah,
watch. Her music is great. She's got something unique about her. And when you hear these records that are trying to emulate everything else on the radio, that's where you're going to just get stuck in this pattern and you're not going to be able to mm, carve out your own niche and
yeah,
stand out for yourself.
your own unique voice,
Yes.
your own signature. Oh, correct in what you're
Yes.
saying. Very, very correct in what you're saying. It's like it's sort of twofold. Like now more than ever, even though the narrative at times may be that it's harder to be in the music industry, it's actually more easier than it was, say, 10 years ago, at
Yeah.
minimum 10 years ago. There's
Yes.
less gatekeepers, less red tape. It's cheaper to be in the music industry. And I think the disadvantage of that is people are taking advantage of that. And they're not really
Yes.
putting as much effort as artists 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago did. They're
Yes.
not putting their full heart and soul into it because now we're in situations where you can still make millions of your music. You can be financially successful of your music, and you can have less than 1,000 streams on Spotify. Like that's
Yes.
the era we're living in, you know.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so all we can do is wait and see what unfolds as we move along. And AI is not making that situation any more easier.
It's not
So
right. And but you know what I will say, and I when AI first had that conversation introduced in the music world, I was somebody that said absolutely not. This is harmful. This is inauthentic, especially as somebody who loves acoustic sort of sounds, live instruments, great vocalists. I said, this is horrible. This is a plight. Now, that sentiment is still true. However, there are advantages for artists with AI, and that is separate from the music creation process. These are things like marketing, SEO, and different types of ways that you can kind of be your own publicist, be your own marketing person and advocate for yourself. Because going back to what you were saying, it's much easier nowadays to break into the music world because 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you go into a multi-million dollar studio and there has to be this technology that's up to radio ready standard. You have to have the resources to put into booking studio sessions. And that's another thing that I tell artists too. Instead of if you can allocate your resources towards the right things, that's where you're going to be successful. If you know your strengths lie in the actual composition of music and the production of music, great. Invest in a home studio, invest in creating high quality demos or even fully ready tracks. Where you want to put your money is in the mixing and the mastering. That is not something that you can get away with done cheaply. If you do that yourself to try to cut corners, that's something that's going to reflect on your music. And I think
yeah, yeah.
if I could, impart that wisdom to people, I would say invest your resources, get a home studio, because if say you spend let's say you spend 2 to 5 grand on a home studio, you can get radio ready records. People don't believe me because my song In These Dreams was recorded in my co-producer Jake Ciberon, who co-produced the track with me. We recorded and cut that song in his basement. It was the basement of his house, and while the acoustics were not great, the end result turned out wonderful because we had Mario McNulty, who's a great friend of mine. He mixed the track and it wound up sounding radio ready. It sounded great. And that's where the investment should be put, rather than if you're going to book studio time and you're a band or an artist and you're putting all this money every time you're going to produce a single and record a single, you're going to be there all day. You might pay a flat fee, you might pay $100 to $300 for a great studio an hour.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
that money, you think about it, right? You could be spending $1,000 just to record one song. So for an EP, that's 5 tracks, 5 grand right there. There's your money for your home studio. Now, with your home studio, you don't have to worry about time limits, budget limits. You do as much as you want to do whenever you're inspired. You can now, and now with this technology, it's absolutely incredible. Some of these the preamps that they have for guitars and microphones, I think Focusrite is a wonderful group. Great they make really great interfaces with great preamps and all different sizes for different studios' needs. If you need, you're a singer songwriter and you need an in for your piano and or your keyboard and you need an in for your microphone and that's it. You could start off with a solo. There's so many different things. I just picked up an Apollo and the pre's are out of this world. And for that sort of money, you could never, 10, 20 years ago, you could never dream of recording that level of quality on that sort of budget. So
yeah.
it's about getting it done properly. You can do it with your own budget and allocate your resources in a smart way that's going to serve you down the line.
It's like you need to focus on your strengths and delegate the rest.
Yes,
That's what we need
yes,
to do.
delegate is a great word.
Yeah, that's something that I learned the hard way, moving through this process. Like you tend to want to do it all yourself, but then you're like, I can't do it all myself. So let me just delegate it
No,
to someone who actually loves to mix, who loves to master, whatever it may be. Let me delegate it. Even though it's going to cost me, this is what we do. This is who we are. So in order for us to
yes,
make it work and sustain ourselves in the long run, we have to make that sort of investments. And like I started making that investment where it was like work for hire, but then you
mm,
meet people along the way who are actually experts in that field, and then you just collaborate with each other, and you sort of just network with each other and work with each other moving forward. Can still remain
that's
both
it.
independent, but when it comes to certain projects, we just get on board together with that.
That's right. That's 100% true. I think when you're networking, that's 100%. A lot of it, you can have the talent, you can have the resources, but you got to network. You have to network because it's who you know. And it's also the final kind of ingredient in that mixture is just hard work. It's simple hard work. It's giving up and sacrificing your time. Your friends are going to the beach on a beautiful day in the summer. You want to make it, you got to be in the studio. You got to be
Yeah.
putting out records. You have to be on it because it's not going to happen just putting it out there and expecting. People expect miracles. They just expect, well, I just released this song on Spotify and it's not getting any plays and nobody's listening. And okay. And on my end, I focus now more on artist development, songwriting, and producing for other artists. So I love to mentor. I love it. I don't, you know, when I started my career, I was 12 years old when I first started in the music industry, writing, producing, recording, and I wanted to be the star. I wanted to be the main stage star that, was front and center. Now I don't. I enjoy the freedom to get to be with my family and my pets. I love my pets. I'm obsessed.
So
I don't know if
weird.
you
So
follow me
weird.
on Instagram. I have a cat and a dog. My cat is right here. Isabella, she's the love of my life. I love her so much. She's looking at me right now. She's like, "Mommy, what are you doing? You're not paying attention." Sophie, our little dog, she's with my husband right now, Jay. They're running errands. So she's with him right now. But otherwise, I just love creating my own schedule, not being a having not having to answer to the beck and call all the time of other people, being
Yeah.
the manager of your own thing. And that's another thing that there's this debate right now going on with certain artists that are not able to, because they signed a record deal and they jumped at the first opportunity to sign that record deal. They didn't read the contract. They didn't have a lawyer read the contract. And that's the number one thing I always tell artists. Another thing to invest in, if you ever have a contract, always hire a lawyer, because if you pay $1,000 for a lawyer to read over a contract versus 5 years down the line having to hire a lawyer to get you out of that contract, to get your royalties for whatever it may be, it's going to save you. I mean, you're talking into the $500,000. Give me 1 second. I'm going to let my little baby. She wants to get out here. I'm going to let her out. Okay, sweetie. She makes me open the door and then she just wants to come in and out.
So one thing that you have mastered, which a lot of artists are still failing to do, is you've converted from an artistic mindset also to an entrepreneurial mindset. So like I always promote the 80-20 rule, but not the one where like 20% of the music, or what was it? 80% of the music is controlled by 20% of artists. 80-20 rule, meaning you need to focus 80% on your business, 20% on the music itself. Not saying that you mustn't give the desired attention to the music, but you need to do that conversion to an entrepreneur. You need to start thinking like an entrepreneur. You need to look at yourself as a music entrepreneur, not just an artist. The music alone is not going to work. And just on the attorney part, like from my personal experience over the last couple of years, even if you can't afford an entertainment attorney, the information is online. Like we're living in a
Yes.
digital era, it is online. Like you can Google these things. There's, I forgot what her name is. She's also from the States, but her YouTube channel is Top Music Attorney. Daily, she's giving like dopeness on entertainment law. She's
Yes.
telling artists like, this is what's happening, this is what you need to look for. So people like stop scrolling through social media, more interested in what's happening in other people's lives, and you actually focus on this sort of content. You can self-educate yourself. And that's what, like,
Yes.
I've done over the years. I've been in situations where people have come after me, but they never have any legal grounds to stand on. And we won the case without even hiring an attorney or even going to court, because we knew what we were talking about. We had our paperwork in order. We were there. One case took us about a
Knowledge
year to resolve, but we did it.
knowledge is power. It
Yes.
really, really is. And also, too, going back to the AI thing, that's another wonderful thing you could do. Plug in a send Chat GPT. I'm still catching up on
Yeah.
all the lingo. I used Chat GPT for the first time um, last week. For I forget what it had to do. It was something business related, and I was thinking. I said, or it was uh, something to do with marketing, and that's one thing I'm not that's one thing that's not my strength is marketing and coming up with different ideas
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
for
Two of us.
myself. I'm good at doing it for other artists because I could see it from an outside perspective, but for myself, I don't it's hard to see yourself from the outside looking in. So I asked Chat GPT, I said, what are some SEO buzzwords that would work well for or some titles that would work well for a blog? Because that's something I'm interested in doing. Is people ask me all the time, how did you start in the music business? How did you, when they're people call my parents and they'll say, can you talk to my son or daughter? They want to learn about getting into the music industry. Okay. So that's why I want to like you've done, like the lawyer you mentioned, giving out that advice, I think is so crucial. And I think with AI to be able to now I don't know if this is 100% true. I have not tried this yet, but I'm interested now. Thinking about it after this, I'm going to try it. Putting in a legal document or sending a legal document to Chat GPT and saying, can you break this down for me in a friendly or simplistic way that somebody who's not a lawyer could understand? And
It
that
does do that.
would be, it's okay. So there you
Yeah,
go.
it does do that. So all you do is upload the document, give it the prompt what you want, and it will give you that. And if you're not happy with it, then you just tell it, okay, do it again. Like make it up. So it
That's
does do that.
really incredible. It really, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it is incredible. I'm a big advocate for limits. We need, limits on AI for sure because we don't know where this is going to go. We don't know, eventually the future of AI. I think there do need to be some sort of some sort of limiting or some sort of committee of people that understand the nature of AI, sort of like, committees for doctors that on boards that can oversee, whether it's in a governmental type of role or not. There needs to be some sort of kind of collective group of people that can help transition people to the future of AI and make sure that it doesn't end up in the hands of the wrong people, because that could be a scary thing for sure.
Like I feel like on the topic of AI, like we're so late to actually put those regulations in place. So like I always keep myself informed, like on a day-to-day basis, because like how we started off this conversation, like innovations are happening each and every single day. And I know, like in the States, for example, there's a lot of committees that have come together and they're trying their best to actually get this right. And then there is also hypocrites like in the mainstream music industry, because there's news
Yes.
and then there's news. Now 99% follows news, but like guys like me, now we follow the real news of what's really happening. And it's so strange to see, like, we get like the top five, okay, the top five record labels in the world, and you'll get an article that they're suing organizations or companies such as Suno. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Suno. So it's also generative AI when it comes to music. So I'm extremely curious. Like I try out all the platforms. Soon as I read about it, okay, cool, I'm gonna try this out. Let me see what it does.
Or
So they will release a statement that we're going after these AI companies and we're going to sue them. It's infringement, so on, so on. Then when you read or you watch certain videos on YouTube, like you really have to dig deep for these videos. You come to information that's telling you that mainstream labels are actually signing deals with the big tech companies with regards to AI. So if you're a mainstream
oh,
artist, you're pushed into a corner, the label is saying, okay, look, we got you on contract. AI is the future. We are going to loan your vocals, and there is nothing that you can do about it. That sort of stuff is happening. And we see it where it's harder more than ever now to get into a mainstream label. They sort of like more just getting rid of staff and artists, and they're focusing on a top 1%. They're investing more in catalogs these days. For me, my personal opinion, they don't really want to sign on any new artists with where the industry is actually going. So let's focus on the 1% and let's invest in AI. But on the surface, we're telling the rest of the music industry, look, we're going after these companies. And from where I'm sitting, that is not happening. It's they allowing it to actually happen because they're more concerned about bottom line than the artists themselves.
sure. Right, and I think what people have to understand too, like what you're saying, it's called the music business,
Yeah.
and record labels have an obligation to create money. And with that, like you're saying, there's the top artists that are producing money. And it goes beyond music. It goes into endorsements and brand deals, and they know that's going to make them money, which that's fine. However, artists don't need a record label nowadays, which is why, again, going back to what I said before, jumping at the chance to sign a deal because it's a deal and because you have backing from a label does not guarantee that you're actually going to get play. It doesn't guarantee it actually, in a lot of senses, if you wind up getting shelved, like many artists do on labels, and then you're stuck in this contract, what do you do then? Because then you can't release your own music on your own terms. So, this is why education is so important, because you want to be the entrepreneur, the captain of your ship, and you want to be able to either be your own distributor, work with a distributing company. That's another thing too. be on top of your licensing, be on top of sign up with ASCAP, BMI, one of the major publishing
CROs. Yeah.
companies,
Yeah.
right? And then you also want to make sure too that you're fully encompassing everything, because people think, for instance, I'm with BMI. I love BMI. I think they're wonderful. I think they're fair. I just think they're a wonderful organization. But people think that iHeartRadio, Pandora Radio, they think that falls under the category, the royalties of being collected by companies like BMI. It's not. So you have to sign up with a program like Sound Exchange, because that they're going to collect the royalties that come from internet radio and other radio as well, Sirius XM, that's a big one. So you want to make sure that you're staying on top of this, and that's why it is difficult. It is difficult to be the artist, and I have to say it's difficult to be a songwriter, be a producer, put out the work, be your own record label, be your own uh manager,
Yeah.
publicist, marketing. You're doing it all yourself. And that's where you have to start delegating. Only when you reach a certain point where you feel, I have the followers, I have the listeners, and I think I would benefit from a manager to get my stuff out there. But if you could, I hate to say cut the corners, but if you could cut those corners while you're starting your career, that's where you're going to be successful. You're going to, again, allocate that stuff to and you know your brand better than anybody else. So until you've
Yeah.
built up that following and the listeners, not only are people, managers and agents and publicists, they're not going to be interested until you're generating buzz. You can do that on your own. Hard
Yeah.
work,
Yeah. Yeah.
you got to keep putting out records. You have to keep just the social media and the press stuff. And I know it's difficult. When social media first started for artists and in general, I'm somebody that I don't like social media. I love it for being able to talk to people, to communicate with people, but sometimes you get stuck on the Ferris wheel of scrolling. You're scrolling and you're wasting your
Mm-hmm.
time and you're seeing other things, some things that can be negative and detrimental to your time, that you could be doing something creative. And I was so against social media because I thought, why can't it be like the 90s where uh, there's this setup with the label. They hear your demo tape, they sign you, they put out your music, they have a marketing team, they have A&Rs, and the whole factory. But
I
now,
miss MTV.
me too. I do
You
too. I really do.
I
I
want
know
MTV
it.
back.
I know. I want my MTV, right? I, it's funny. I watched a documentary on Netflix the other night. I'm not sure if you watched it yet. I think it's called The Best Night in Music, or the best night
No,
in
no.
pop music, and it's about, and I know you'll appreciate this because I think you're a fan of Michael Jackson.
Yeah, yeah, correct.
Yeah, same
Correct.
here. Same here. What Michael Jackson is was the greatest, and
Yeah.
the so this was about the documentary was about the creation of We Are the World and how the whole night went down was incredible. The story behind that. Most people don't know Lionel Richie was really the orchestrator of that whole project. And him and Michael, and they wrote the song, but they had to devise this plan to sort of get all these different artists of high caliber. You had, Diana Ross, you had Cyndi Lauper, you had all these huge Stevie Wonder. I mean, you had all these huge artists. How are we going to get them into this recording studio? There are all these big divas. How are we going to get them in here all at the same? How are we going to get them all to LA at the same time without tipping off the media because they wanted to keep it a secret? So the night of the American Music Awards, Lionel Richie was hosting, and they devised this plan. They sent all the artist managers a demo cassette tape of the demo. So they had about a week to learn the song. Then when they all flew in for the American Music Awards right after, they went to a studio. It was all quiet, and they weren't allowed to bring any publicists, managers in, and they recorded it and they did it. And it took, and all the walls came down without all that hype around the artists. It was just their talent. And they came together for
Wow.
this great cause. And it's such an eye-opening documentary that I think any music fan would appreciate.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely.
So put it
So
on your watch list.
I will, I will. Okay, so this podcast or this show, this recording started off so different than like what I was expecting. Like you really need to get your own blog going, your own podcast going, because the information that you're sharing is really valuable and artists need to hear what you have to say. I
Thank
just want to
you.
touch on one more thing on what you were saying, and it's something I actually learned over the last few months, and this is just for the listeners and their knowledge. I noticed that, so I got approved as a publisher with our local PRO. And I noticed that the traditional PROs like BMI, they see to your traditional radio royalties, like a traditional radio stations. But I also found out that besides performance rights organizations, you also get digital rights organizations because you mentioned Cyrus FM. That
Yes.
actually goes through Sound Exchange and it doesn't go
Yeah,
through BMI. Am I
exactly.
correct with that?
You're correct. Yep.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
had mentioned before, the sound exchange. Yes.
Yeah, okay, maybe I missed that. Yeah. So, like artists just need to know, the difference on where, it's actually getting filtered.
Yes. Because you want to get your full what you deserve, and if you're putting out these records and they're getting played by iHeartRadio and Pandora, which uh, my single "In These Dreams" was just picked up by iHeartRadio and Pandora and a lot of online radio stations, which is wonderful. It's such an honor to have that platform to share that sort of your work.
Work,
But
yeah.
with that being said, you want to make sure you're covering all the bases, copyright, and all these publishing groups and PROs, and like you mentioned, you really want to be on top of it. You have to be, and that's where with the record labels, they're on top of it. They have people that do all that stuff. They have a team of people that do all that stuff. So when you're your own record label and all this stuff, it is a lot of work. I mean, what I try to do is schedule a day off where no recording. It's a day to register, go on BMI, because through BMI, I have my songwriting. And this is another thing. There's a difference between being a songwriter, okay? Just as a songwriter, you could register on BMI or ASCAP. You could also register a publishing company. You could either do one of two things. You can register your own LLC first, music publishing company, and then set it up as a division or a DBI, or I'm sorry, DBA, doing business as, through BMI, or you can just go directly through BMI and start your publishing company through them, pay a fee. I always recommend do the first one. Do your own publishing LLC, set that up as a company, then go through BMI, because again, or I'm sorry, through any organization, because then again, you're going to get more control. And that's something I tell people all the time. You want to be in control. You don't want anybody telling you, you have to do this. You owe me this. I deserve this from you. You want to be the person, you want to be the boss. And
Yeah,
especially for
yeah,
women, this is very important, because I'm a huge advocate for empowering women in the music industry for a lot of reasons. Because a lot of times people see women in the music industry as just the artists. They're not seen as, and so the artists and the songwriter, they're not seen as producers. There's not enough women producers. There needs to be more female producers. That's number one. Number two, it's important to advocate for yourself. You have to be your own boss. You have to educate yourself, read, learn up on all this stuff, because you hear these stories. Recently, I saw something quickly on Twitter about BB Rexa, who I love. I think she's an incredible artist. She's an incredible writer. She seems like it's such a sweet and wonderful girl. And what's going on now with her record label is that she's not able to make decisions. She's not able to get out of her contract. They're not releasing certain music that she wants released. She's not able to do what she wants to do. And she's publicly expressing the desire to get out of this contract, similar to Kesha. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story with Kesha, but
no,
she
no,
wanted
no.
to get Kesha went to court because she had claimed that her producer that had produced her first records had sexually assaulted her and was holding her quote unquote hostage in her deal. And she wanted freedom over her ability to get out of that, because how could you continue to work with your abuser? How could you go to work every day
Yeah, yeah.
and like any job for a woman and see that person every day? So eventually she won that case, which I think is wonderful that she's able to now she's an independent artist, and her new song Joyride, incredible song, is just it's charting so high, and I'm so happy for her. I think that is just such a success story for women artists and women in the music industry. And I always looked up to certain women songwriters and producers that paved the way for other women to be able to enter this industry. And Linda Perry comes to mind from Four Non Blondes. She wrote and produced the song Beautiful by Christina Aguilera, amongst hundreds of other huge top charting, top 40 pop songs. She is an incredible
It's
producer,
sort of
writer.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to have a conversation with an artist that's driven by purpose and meaning. And that's so
Yeah,
important for your brand. Like you need to define your purpose because that's going to take you all the way. Your music has to be backed by something much more bigger than the music and yourself
yes.
that gives
100
benefit to society and humanity.
Yes, absolutely. There is a higher cause, and I
Yeah,
believe no matter what religion or spirituality that you identify with, there is a higher calling and that you have to tap into, because when you tap into that higher power, you're going to know what your destiny is. People ask me, they ask in general, what eh, should I do this? Am I meant to do this? You'll know. You will know 100% if you're into this. And it's not just about I want to be famous, I want to make money, I want to do this. That should not be your end goal. You want to be successful and be able to sustain yourself. That's wonderful. And to leave a legacy, that's wonderful. But I'm a huge advocate for kindness. I'm an advocate for human rights, and uh, I'm an advocate for just being a good person, being kind to other people. That's just such a big thing I believe in, because that's that's why I do what I do. Not because I want to be famous, not because I want to make money, because I want to inspire other people. I want to make great music that helps people. We're
yeah, yeah,
healers.
yeah. Your music is a
We're
component.
healers. Yes, it's
Yeah,
a component of
component.
of the whole aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're not only like an artist when it comes to music, but we're an artist of life itself. We also have to
we're
create like
we're
certain
a
innovations in life
conduit.
itself.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
we're
like,
a conduit to I believe to a God or to higher calling that speaks through us, and we're just the conduit that we could, put out though that sound and those records. And you hear certain artists, and going back to Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Amy Winehouse, those are once in a lifetime artists. Lady Gaga, I mean, I really believe those artists, it's a divine, something divine speaking through them. Prince as well, and I know that Prince talked a lot about that. They said a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
times, kind of, and Jimi Hendrix as well, said, they would say, "Where does this come out of? How does this come out of you?" And it's God. it's a higher being that that you
Yeah,
tap
yeah.
into. So it's that's it.
It's so
And
crazy how
so
the
simple.
universe, yeah, it's so crazy how the universe works that you're also a fan of Michael Jackson. And I'm gonna come back to that because, like, when I look at your personal lineage and your bloodline, um, your aunt who was an established actor, was it Corinne? It's pronounced
Yes,
correct.
Corinne
Corinne was an
Camacho.
established
Yes.
actor. And I'm gonna come back to her.
Y-
I'm gonna tell you about a moment I had when I actually came across this. When we were actually supposed to go live last week. And then, your father, Joe, who was involved in sports, and then I put sports, I put music and gaming all in one basket. Your mother,
Yeah.
Bonnie, was a dancer. Both your brothers
Yes.
are also artists. And why I related that to Michael Jackson, like when I did a deep dive into Michael Jackson on my Patreon channel, like his life started off at like 5 years old. That's when his career
Yes.
like officially started. And yes, okay, yes, there were positives and so on being in the limelight at that age, but it also psychologically, like in a negative way, messed him up as he moved into his teenage life and then, of course, into adulthood. And then I look at you who started your career as well at such a young age, getting yourself familiar with the piano at 4 years old and starting your musical journey at 12. So, also being a fan of Michael Jackson, how was that like affected you throughout your life and your childhood moving into adulthood?
It's interesting you mentioned that because I was recently asked about that on an interview, and I spoke about that because my parents were so supportive of me as a musician. They wanted me to get a formal education. They wanted me to do the right things in terms of taking lessons. My, I was extremely privileged. I went to my freshman year of high school. The summer after, I went to Interlochen Center for the Arts in Michigan for musical theater, and that was one of the greatest experiences. And my parents always were so supportive. If you want to, take the piano lessons, take violin lessons, take voice lessons, classical. They wanted me to have this foundation. But with that being said, they understood the pitfalls of this industry. And they absolutely did not want me to be in the music industry when I was young. And that was a thing that it was tough for me to grapple with when as I got older because I said to my parents, I said, "Why? Why did you, I know you wanted me to be successful. Why did you hold me back in certain ways? Why did you not let me take that meeting? Why did you?" When I was 12, I was songwriting and recording in a studio that a family friend of ours owned. He's a wonderful person. He's a awesome person. He's a phenomenal producer. His name is Michael Patzig from Connecticut. Wonderful guy. And that was kind of my experience as I kind of grew into this. And then I did things like I sang the national anthem at the Excel Center in Hartford, Connecticut, for thousands of people. And I performed shows. But when it came to meetings, there were certain things that were sketchy. There were certain people that wanted you to do certain things. Take this meeting with this person, but your parents can't be there. And my parents said, no, absolutely not. Whereas a lot of parents would say yes, not because always because of a negative thing. It's not always uh, a case of, being a stage parent. It's sometimes wanting what's best for your child. And if your child wants to perform and be in the music industry, you want your child to be successful in anything. So you're willing to do anything to help them, but you have to also be their protector. You're a parent at the end of the day, and that comes first. So you have to be the one to navigate this world. And I'm not saying don't let your child start in the industry young, but you have to be there with them, be their eyes and their ears, because when we're young, everything we look through the world with rose-colored glasses. We see everything just uh, everybody's nice, everybody's kind, everybody has good intentions. As we grow older, we see that's not always the case. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's important. You have to protect yourself. But going back to the Michael Jackson thing, like you said, I think that had a huge detrimental effect. How how can you, when you're a child, you see I remember listening to a story Michael Jackson told in an interview, and he said all the kids were at the playground. They were all playing. I asked my dad, I said, "Dad, can I go to the playground? Can I play?" He said, "No, you're gonna practice all day." And it's this double-edged sword that that's why they were successful because of their father. But but that doesn't mean he wasn't abusive. That doesn't mean he wasn't a bad father,
yeah,
So in that sense, without him, they wouldn't have been the Jackson 5. They wouldn't Michael Jackson, might not have been who he was and who we know him as if there was no push from Joe Jackson. But any child star, they are secluded. They're treated differently because they're given certain privileges, and maybe other kids see that as why did they get that privilege? They must think that they're better than us. So then it turns into bullying. So it's important to I had a friend growing up who was on Nickelodeon, and I thought her mother did, and they're still friends of mine till this day. Her mother just did such a wonderful job directing her career because she was a child, and she wanted her to go to go to school. You're going to go to a normal school. When you have to do your filming, you could do tutoring, but I want you to go to a normal school because I want you to socialize. I want you to have a normal life. And that's important to find that balance. That's what that's what helps. That's what, is the difference between somebody that becomes addicted, child star that becomes addicted to drugs.
yeah, yeah,
That's the
yeah.
difference, is having the support of your family is everything. And I was very privileged and lucky that my family was so supportive
Oh,
and
definitely.
still are. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
guess, depending what class you also come from these days, Like if you have a talented kid and you're from the lower class, and then you get an opportunity to shine, whether it be on TV or as an artist, you get blinded by the paycheck that's in front of you, and you don't make any sort of like logical, calculated decisions. So that's something that that also needs to be addressed. And something also mentioned,
Yes.
yesterday as well, is there's not enough, or it's something I've just been like advocating myself over the last month, like the bottom 10% of talent in the world that nobody really focuses on because they don't have the means. And I'm talking about like the basic means of just having, say, internet connection, having a phone where you can actually check, okay, what is the correct information? Because as you said, someone comes along, you think they're cool, they're nice, they got your best interests at heart, they get you to sign or they get your parents to sign because now we're going to take you out of poverty. Next thing you know, you're theirs for life.
Yes.
Yeah, those things
That's
do
a
happen.
huge thing. And I think
Yeah,
that's a great point because in other countries like Africa, people take for granted. We have all these, I call them luxuries, 5G, Wi-Fi. These are luxuries that we have. Somebody that I love is the artist Akon because he went over to Africa and he's helping to uh, build an infrastructure where people have access to those sorts of things. In this day and age, nobody should be denied
yeah,
the access to technology, to information, to knowledge. This is so critical. And you're so right. There is such a wealth inequality, and the people that come from a lower uh, class of people that don't have the resources to invest don't often have the ability to do things like consult with a lawyer, to before they sign the contract, before they, get the check,
yeah,
because the check looks great. You see uh, a lot of these reality stars that the check looks great, they get the check, it's gone,
yeah,
within
yeah,
a few years, they don't invest it. That's another thing I like to tell people. Listen, I'm not Susie Orman. I am not a financial expert, but I will but I will give one piece of advice, and that's to invest your money properly. Don't People are obsessed with the latest trends. They want the latest thing. They want the latest iPhone, the latest shoes, and this and that. And because it's so ingrained in our culture that we need to be cool, we need the
status.
we need the Stanley Cup, you know? We need this, we need that. No, take that money, invest it, put it in a a Roth IRA, put it in, certain stocks, and invest that, but put it in a retirement account that will continue to grow, and don't touch it. Leave it there
Yeah,
until you're older, because I, I just see so many people, they're just so quick to, well, I'm broke, I'm broke. You're broke, but you have the new iPhone, you have this, or invest it in your art.
yeah.
That's a great investment. Invest it in your art.
What's
That's
the
something
common excuse you
worthwhile.
get when you come across that sort of behavior? Life is short. I'm living in the moment.
Yeah,
I'm living
YOLO.
in the moment. I'm living in the moment,
Yes.
And I get this a lot
Yeah,
with the hip hop guys, like because I mainly focus on hip hop. And these guys, like, there's no limits. Like, there's just no limit for these guys. They're literally living in the moment, literally living in the moment. And then couple days down the line, you back to square one. And then you think, okay, I'm going to go back into studio. I'm going to push out another track. I'm going to get some sort of performance deal somewhere, another nightclub. And then it doesn't happen. Then what?
then what? You
Then
have to
what?
prepare. You're exactly right. Every artist has to prepare for the then what, because going back to like these artists that sign these deals, you might have most artists have if you have a 3 to 5 year run, God bless. That's great. Like that is wonderful. And invest that's where I'm saying invest that money, because that that money, the millions of dollars, the brand deals, that is not going to be there forever.
Yeah.
That's not going to keep coming in like it was, like you're saying. That's something you have to eh, put that money away, save it for a rainy day, invest it in a retirement account, because you're not going to be, you're not, there's very, very few artists that have a career span of 30 years. Elton John, Madonna. I believe, of course, Lady Gaga will be is of that caliber. You have Celine Dion. These
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whitney Houston was one of my favorite artists, and she is and was the greatest vocalist of all time.
I can second
She
that. It's also the narrative that comes from the top, especially like within hip hop, because
Yes,
the guys at the bottom are looking at the guys at the top living this flashy life. Yet they don't understand that whatever that artist is promoting that they do have doesn't actually belong to them. Yeah, they may
yes,
own something here and there, but bulk of what they own, I would say like maybe even 90% of what they own doesn't belong to them.
right.
There's a persona going on. There's a persona, and this also happens in like mainstream record labels as well. They will get someone who is like, say, not really from the hood or from the street, but they'll convert them into, yeah, they're from the hood and they're from the street, and they push that narrative because it sells. Let's be honest, it
Sure.
sells.
Yes.
So they don't understand the psychology behind it and the psychology in the music industry and how they're actually getting consumers to buy your music.
And not only that too, in a kind of totality view, a lot of artists too are given free things because essentially they're going to promote them. They're going to be
Yeah.
seen in paparazzi shots wearing the latest fashionable thing. And with other artists, they're going to be paid to promote it through social media. They're
Yeah.
getting that for
Yeah.
free. They're getting that for free on top of getting a paycheck for that. So, don't when you're an up and coming artist, focus on the music, focus on your message, focus on the things that matter. It's not about being, the most who has the most money or the most things to offer. If that's your brand, there's ways of doing that where you don't have to spend a lot of money. I know it's different in the hip hop industry because, you know, a lot of people will say, that's just clout, or, whatever. That that's
That's
not
how it
true.
is.
That's how, yeah, yeah,
But it's only the
and you
opposite.
can't fake that.
Yeah, you
Or that
can't.
I'm that wait, what's the term? I'm such an old lady. That's cap. That's cap. It even weird coming from me, but it's like that's the word. I'm like, what's that term that, oh my gosh, I'm so like out of the loop of what the cool words are, and so
But there's so many, and there's like a new one getting invented each day. You're like, what?
yeah,
What do you say? You know,
yeah.
like, also, that's hot. That's hot.
Oh
That's
well,
dope.
wait a minute. That's been around since the early 2000s. Paris Hilton, I love her. I should think she's so great, And again, that's somebody who like she knows her brand, and she's such a smart. People do not give her enough credit. She's such a smart businesswoman that she was able to the whole blonde girl persona that she put on, it's all marketing, and she's such a genius, and she's done it so well and been able to, with that's hot and all her, phrases that she's like, it's so genius. And that's what it again, it comes down to whether you're an artist, a celebrity, whatever, you have to have your own thing going on. Like you have to have your
Yeah.
own niche little uh avenue that you're doing. And it can't be something that's like, oh hey, chat GPT, can you come up with an idea for, something that makes me unique? Like it has to be something that is truly what you're about, and it has to come organically.
Yeah. What Paris Hilton, if I'm not mistaken, was last year. She made a strategic business move, which like was super dope. I mean, anyone who has ever criticized her, like, should take that criticism back because she actually made a move into Web3. Like, she was on stage with Gary Vee and she was promoting Web3, that she's going into NFTs. And I mean, you wouldn't have expected that from like Paris Hilton and what people
Sure.
have said about her, like, over the years. So you're 100% correct in what you're saying. I agree.
Yeah,
I do
thank
agree.
you. And I also,
Yeah.
too, she's now a huge advocate for reforming a lot of these schools that, sh like, Provo Canyon School that she attended, uh, was extremely abusive to the children. It's a type of school where they take it's marketed as for troubled kids, but what's come out now to light about what's happened to these kids is just horrendous. And she's been going to Congress, she's been legislating for laws against these schools because what they've done for
Wow.
years is horrendous, and what they've gotten away with is horrible. So anybody that is an advocate against for human rights, for animal rights. I'm a huge animal rights advocate, and I think just being a good person, you're good in my book. If you if
Yeah.
you're
Well,
if you're so.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you're an incredible individual, how you put your
Oh,
focus
thank you.
towards humans, towards pets, like any living creature, like any living thing out there, just to have a heart for it does take you a long way. So before we move into your music, so I want to circle back to the episode that I had when I was actually researching about you and I came across your aunt. So and this is like a personal story. So when I was growing up, like, I mean, in that era, you didn't have access to too much content that was online. Yeah, you had MTV, but it was all like on television. But that was like later on. But there was one show that was always consistent in my life, and that was like provided, okay, by the government, was Days of Our Lives. So as
Oh
I'm
yeah,
going
yeah.
through and I'm reading about you, so first I read it on paper, like, okay, your aunt was in Days of Her Life. So I'm like, no way. Really? So then there was an article I was reading about you, and then there was a hyperlink that took me to a profile of your aunt. So I'll go into the profile because now I'm curious, like Days of Our Lives. Like, when was the last time you even thought about Days of Our Lives?
Oh, sure, sure. The
I
original.
go on,
Yes.
I check her bio, and then I see a link that's showing a clip of her in Days of Our Lives. So I'm like, what? I click on this and I'm like, okay, I went from no way to way. And I checked it there, and then I checked all these actors from back in the day. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Like, it was like,
it's funny. I have I'll show you right behind me. I have that is a little poster card um from that's my aunt right there, Corinne Camacho, and um James Garner, who was her co-star in the movie Marlowe, which was an MGM movie production, and that was something I have that I hung up here in the studio, which is something that I always I just liked. I like to keep good things that inspire me around. I have like my crystal, certain crystals and just like pictures of all my grandparents have passed away, unfortunately, but I have pictures of all of them, like, around the house and in here in the studio because I believe they're with you all the time, and I'm such a believer in that. But yeah, I mean, going back to my aunt, her career was just incredible. She was in television, she was in film, she was in so much. If you go, I'm sure you have on her IMDb page, it's just incredible the work she did. And she started as a piano player too. She went, uh, I believe it was in New Jersey. It was a conservatory that she studied piano before her family her parents moved out to California so she could start a career. And she started as a model, which then led to landing roles in film and television. And whenever I talk to people from an older generation, I always mention the show MASH because she was on an episode of MASH um, and played one of the nurses. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that show. MASH. It's always on.
no.
It's on Turner Classic, I believe, that they play it uh, th- a couple times a day. But she was on an episode, and Alan Alden was the actor who was the lead. He was the lead actor of the show MASH, and in the episode that my aunt Corinne was in, she kissed Alan Alden. So I always, kind of get that to say, like, I always tell the older generation it's kind of a funny thing. I say, my aunt Corinne, she was on MASH, an episode of MASH, and they're like, oh, which one? And I say, the one where she kissed Alan Alden, and it always kind of gets a reaction out of people because it is a funny episode, and she's she was just such a dynamic force, and she was such a beautiful person inside and out. And towards the end of her life, when she was diagnosed with cancer, she started writing and recording music, children's music, which was just such a beautiful thing. And she was volunteering at hospice centers. Here she is. She's battling cancer and she's volunteering at hospice centers. I mean, she was just a lovely person. And I contact all the time with her son and daughter, um, who are just the sweetest people. They're just so sweet. So they're, she left such a legacy, and I think I I want to, follow in her footsteps, and she's certainly my biggest inspiration for sure.
So I know you had ambitions, I'm not sure when, for Broadway. So have you ever pursued a career in acting like professionally, or is that still on your to-do list?
That is 100% on my to-do list. I am the biggest Broadway nerd in the world. I love like we actually, my husband and I got tickets for my birthday to see the Michael Jackson Experience. What a show. It was incredible. The lead actors that played, they had three different versions of Michael. They had young Michael when he was in his late teenage years, and then an older Michael. And every single one of them, the singing, the acting, the dancing was incredible. It was like watching Michael perform. It
Yeah.
was almost like it was surreal watching it. I mean, you felt like it was like Michael Jackson was on stage. It was a real surreal moment. And my mom and I used to listen to Broadway music in the car. And my first voice teacher, Cynthia, was training me in classical and musical theater. And I always kind of, when I started recording my own music, producers would go crazy. Like, they would be so annoyed because they're like, that vibrato. They're like, that freaking vibrato that you have is like so musical theater. They're like, you got to stop the vibrato. Sing it straight, Don't do it like, with the theatrics and the vibrato. Just less musical theater, more pop, sing it straight. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do when you've been, your voice naturally produces a vibrato. To kind of choke that off, and to stifle that is not good for your voice. But that's something that I want to explore further, is performing again. I Growing
Mm.
up, I did, did shows, and I loved it. I love musical theater to this day, and I think it would be. I love acting. I love acting. For me is so fun. I think as artists, we act every day. I think, that just comes with the territory.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes we have to act like we're happy when we're not. Sometimes we have to act like, just to get through it. So I love, and again, I think every artist is a performer. So no matter what aspect you go into, it's performance, and I love it. I love musical theater. I would love to one day do Broadway, or do, something like that.
Oh, well, I will anticipate and wait for you to be in your first movie so I can watch that.
Oh, thank you. Well, if I do a Broadway show, we'll make sure to get you front row tickets for sure.
Definitely.
Just don't throw any tomatoes if it's bad.
I was listening today to a track you released in June, Pleasure. And the first thing that came to mind was 1940s, 1950s Marilyn Monroe. That's the first
Yes.
image that came to mind. And it just shows like how diverse you are with your music. And I actually I took out a piece of paper and I went through like your most popular tracks. Like I was just like browsing through Spotify, and then we got In These Dreams, which is like something I want to touch on with the lyrics, and I compared that to like a Celine Dion, Whitney Houston sort of vibe. That's like my
Yes.
personal opinion on it. Human Nature and Pleasure, like the Kylie Minogue sort of vibe. And
Yes.
then we had Pleasure, Late Night Thoughts, and Black and Blue, which is one of your latest, also Marilyn Monroe. So, what's your artistic process when it comes to all of these compositions? Like, what makes you come up with these ideas and these concepts and these lyrics? And so diverse in how it actually sounds, the end result.
Thank you. Um, you know, when I did In These Dreams, when I do any song, I have a vision for the song right away. When I write the song, immediately I have the vision, how it's going to be arranged, how it's going to be produced, right to mind. When I wrote In These Dreams, I wrote it on the piano. I brought it to my co-producer Jake. I gave him like my 1 minute spiel. I said, this is my idea. I want it to be whimsical. I want it to be fun, childlike. I want it to be a big power ballad. It's funny you mentioned Celine Dion because that was somebody that, I mean, I absolutely adore her. And that was somebody that, the Whitney Houston, Celine Dion, a big, I said, this song is for a big vocalist. And I cut the demo and with the intention that a big vocalist like that will re-record the track. But it, I wound up, releasing it because I was working with a manager at the time a, f- a few years ago, and you know, we had a lot of disagreements about who should sing it, how we were going to put it out there into the music sphere, so to speak. And eventually we parted ways, but I said, I'm sitting on this song, I believe is a great song and will resonate with people. And I said, I'm going to release it because I believe in it. I had my friend and uh, producer engineer Mario McNulty, who's produced for and mixed for David Bowie, for Prince, for Willow.
Wow.
So he agreed to do the mixing for the track. So when I had cut the original demo back in, I think it was around 2016 when we first did the original demo, the vocals were still good, but we didn't do the last chorus with the key change. So I had to I had to do that here in my studio. There were no background vocals, so I had to do all the background vocals here. Uh, but otherwise, it was in really good shape. And I think what Jake and I did with the producing, Jake Ciberon is incredible with playing. He could play any instrument, and I laid down the piano and I just kind of went through and I said, and what about this? Let's add this component in. What do you think about this? And we do it, and he goes, you know what? It's missing a glockenspiel. And I said, you're right. It is missing a glockenspiel. So he puts it in the beginning, and I said, but just on every, just on every other downbeat. Just put it, because he did it at first, every downbeat, and I'm like, that's overkill. Let's do it every other one. He does it, and I said, that's perfect because it just provides that little. It's almost like a little fairies dancing around in like this dream-like world, and the second verse talks about Neverland and that whole concept, because the concept of the song is journeying to a place, to this land where there's no fear, there's no negativity, there's no hurt or pain. And I wanted people to be able to go to that place when they listen to that song to make them feel better. Because I know at that time in my life, I was going through a period where I'm like, where am I going in life? I'm not, I had dropped out of college. I had no direction. I had just gotten out of a relationship. And I'm like, what what am I doing? I am so I just started writing and I said, what if I fall? Maybe it's time, starting all over and feeling alive. And that just grew into it because it was like, okay, what if I fall? I'll pick myself back up. Sometimes you need to fall in life. Pick yourself back up because that's where, you learn how to be the best version of yourself. The best artist is when you fall, or the best, just human being. Everybody goes through it. Um,
You have
but
to
to go
fail.
back, you have to fail. And going back to, you were mentioning the records, Pleasure, Late Night Thoughts, and those sort of jazz records that I did. So I was, funny story, I lived at a recording studio for about a little over a year. I lived in the basement of this recording studio. The basement was a studio. It was Studio B. Best experience of my life. I learned the most. I learned how to produce there. I learned Pro Tools. I learned how to work with different artists. I learned the technical aspects of, you know, different sort of equipment and DAWs and different all these different things, and it was such a good experience, but it was also a really lonely time in my life, and I didn't have a lot of people around me. I there was Vic Steffens, who owns the studio. He's so wonderful, and he allowed me to live down there. I was basically a squatter because I just moved in one day, and he's like, so I see you have all your stuff down, like your bags are down there. I guess you're moving in. And I'm like, I guess so too. I mean, I'm like, I don't know what else to do. I don't, I was too ashamed to move back in with my parents. And
Because
I,
this was just after you dropped out of college, correct?
right, well, so I had gone to Berkeley College of Music back in 2012. I had dropped out of Berkeley, and then later on, I had gone back to school to a community college here in Connecticut, and I dropped out again because I said I was going for business. And I'm like, I don't want to be going for business. This is not what I want to do. I was never good at school. I was never good at paying attention and learning and sitting down. I definitely have ADHD. I can't focus for too long. I kind of get distracted. And I knew the best education for me was to be in person in the studio, learning, working with artists and bands. And that was the only way that I was going to be able to do it. So that's why I was singing for a jazz fusion band who rehearsed at that studio. We would rehearse every Wednesday, and essentially, I was living out of my car for about a month. And luckily, it was in the fall because it was, still a little bit warm until the
Wow.
nighttime. And then the I didn't tell anybody. I didn't, I told one person who I worked with at the time, but I didn't tell the band, and they were all guys, and they found out that I was living in my car. They're like, they saw my stuff in my car, and they went to Vic and said, she's living out of her car, this is bad. Like, the winter's coming. Like, what are we gonna do?
Mm.
And Vic's like, all right, like, I'll talk to her. And so he, pulls me aside one day, and he's like, if temporarily, like, you could stay downstairs in the studio if you want, like, crash on the futon, because I mean, I was too ashamed to go back home. I was working, but it was like barely covering, the cost of, I could get an apartment. And so I'm like, all right, well, this is a win-win for me. This is great. I could, live here for a little bit, save up, find my own place, and get all this invaluable knowledge. And it wound up being just such a great experience. It was fun, but it was it was a very lonely time. I was listening to a lot of jazz records, Nina Simone, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra. I've always been a huge fan of jazz, but there's something when you go through a period of sadness or depression, that there's something so comforting about jazz music. And so I was listening to a lot of jazz records at that point, and I put out, I produced, I wrote, produced, and performed a whole 10-track album that I finally got the masters back a few months ago. So I decided to kind of put out a few of those songs. And there's a lot more, on that. And I think I will put it out as like a full album or an EP at some point. But it's
So
it's a
who owned
very
the masters
personal.
before? The masters for that
Essentially,
center.
essentially it's kind of a gray area because it was recorded at Vic's studio, but it was uh, we never had any sort of contract, and I I produced everything myself. So essentially the masters were mine. It was just such a hassle to get them back. And I don't like to speak negatively about anybody. I don't think it was anybody purposely doing this. I don't know, but the hard drive where all of my masters, Pro Tool sessions, all of my pictures, videos, the backup from my Mac was on there. That hard drive went missing.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
And found its
So
way back.
it found its way back a few months ago. So I got everything back, which is great, which is good. I'm glad to have everything back. It feels like a part of my dignity was stripped away by that because those records were so personal. It's kind of like spilling your heart out uh, you know, into that music. And so to have that back, it really feels like all these pieces of me are, kind of like back. And I do feel vindicated in a lot of ways. And it's nice. And again, just kind of those memories, those pictures I had from performances, from, certain, friendships and great memories, that it was so nice to go through that and to look at all that stuff. So it was very cool. It's a good feeling.
Well, the universe always has a reason, nothing just happens because it happens. So when it did go missing,
Right.
it was for you to actually evolve into who you're becoming. And now that it's come back also for now, another reason. And you're going to identify what that reason is as you move along. So,
Yes.
there's one thing I want, like, artists who are going to listen to this podcast to really understand and get is that this process is not easy. So we're expecting easy, and you mentioned as also it's not easy. So people tend to look at the surface. They look at Zoey Tess, your music that now you've built and established a successful career for yourself. But now you've gone a layer down into, guys, this is what I had to go through. I dropped out of college. I stayed in my car. I stayed in the basement for an entire year working on music. And artists need to look in the mirror and really be like, am I willing to do that? Am I willing to sacrifice that? Discipline myself? Am I? And the sad truth is, not many are. So you're really not going to get to the level that you're really expecting yourself to get at. I mean, no matter how dope your music may be in the end, if it's not built by a solid foundation, it means nothing.
You're right. And I think too that, like I mentioned before, listen, I'm not telling people go live in your car, go live in somebody's, in a studio basement. I'm not encouraging that. I'm not saying that that's, what you need to do to make it. I'm just saying, like that was my path. And but like going back to what you're saying, you do need to make sacrifices. And like I mentioned earlier in the show, I said, it's about, you know, an 80-degree day in the summer, beautiful weather. Your friends are going to the beach. Are you going to go with them, or are you going to do an interview? Are you going to work on your music? Are you going to, because
Hmm.
that's the sacrifice. You can't have, you can set boundaries. And that's something I've learned and I'm still working on, and I've learned over the past year with, you know, my husband is amazing. He's just such a great support system for me. He's always there and the great thing is he knows he's not involved in music. He's like involved in construction and the garbage business. So he's so far removed from it, which is so great because when I go to him, it I don't get these analytical responses. I get these just, you know, uh, these
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
hard truths or support in a way that's maybe I couldn't have seen it from that perspective. But I've learned to balance my life because I don't want to wake up at 40, 50 and say, I should have done this. I should have done this for myself. Because as much as having a career is wonderful and is, if you want to make it, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot. You also need to put value on the things that make you happy. My dog and my cat are my whole world. I live for them. I'm like they're so great. They're my biggest supporters and um as is my husband and it's just we have this like, kind of like little world that we live in and it's just so, we're like in this like peaceful little place surrounded by by trees and I really value privacy. I value independence. I value my peace above anything else. I mean, that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
so
yeah.
number one is peace because I've been through so much craziness that I said to myself many years ago, I said, I don't want to ever do something and I don't have to do something that disrupts my peace, whether it's a friendship, a business deal, uh, a relationship, a marriage, anything that is going to make me unhappy or take away from that peace that I've worked so hard to build from the ground up and do through a lot of therapy and self-love. And so that's my number one priority is just maintaining that peace and I think I think we do a good job.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, two things back to like how I would sum up the sacrifice because everyone's condition is different or situation is different. Is humility. You need to have humility in your life. Like if the average person looks at their life, there is things that I don't need to do or have in my life that I can get rid of. If you choosing, for example, to eat takeaway 4 times in a week, 8 times in a month, where that money could be going towards building your studio and investing in production and the correct people, then that's on you. There is no excuse. It's humility. Like I learned
Yes.
humility the hard way in 2020 when COVID hit. Like it was all about humility. If you were ever going to survive doing what you love through that period, I mean, still surviving through that period, you know, it comes down to humility. You had to make sacrifices, or you're going to come out on the other end crying, and
Yes.
depressed. There's going to be anxiety.
Absolutely.
So humility should always be practiced. And then, like
Yeah.
one funny enough, when I asked Adrian for like just like a summary, about your background and so on, and then she was like, "Okay, I try to focus on the music," and she actually, not sure if it was her or me, or she, oh yeah, she said I shouldn't go too into your personal life. So I was like, no, I'm only gonna like touch on like being in a relationship and being married to Jay. How do you keep that balance, which you've summed it up already, because it can be something so hard to do, like personally, even for myself. And I think with Jay, he gets you. He gets what drives you, what's your passion, and he supports it. And it's so rare to find. For me personally, as it is so rare to find. It's like you get into this
Yes.
relationship and they may get it from the start that this is what it takes. Yes, I'm going to make time for you, but keep in mind that I'm not doing a 9 to 5 year. Keep in mind that weekends, some weekends, I still need to be on the grind. That's
Yep.
just what comes with it. And then they'll be like, okay, cool, no problem. We're going to support you.
And until it actually happens. Yeah, and then it's a
Yeah,
whole other story. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Then it's like, you
Yeah.
don't have time for me and you don't have time for my family. And it's like
Yes.
story after story, and it never ends well. So, like, it's super cool that you're with someone that gets it, that really gets it.
And I got that from the first months that we were dating because I he would say to me, he was never the jealous person or controlling, which I which you look for in a partner. And he'd say to me, he'd go, anytime you want, if you like, because I'm a homebody and so is he. So we would, but when we first started dating, like our idea of a date was like watching, CSI and like a carton of ice cream, like that to us was like awesome. So when we first started dating, he would say, if you ever want to go out with your friends, if you ever want to go out, like I don't care. Like if you want to, do whatever you want to do. I'm never going to be the type to, you know, tell you what to do and that sort of thing. And that was very important to me because I've always been a free soul. I've always been a free spirit in the sense of even when I was little, I always did what I wanted. I didn't listen to anybody, and that kind of got me in trouble a lot. But I didn't do well with authority figures. I just wanted to, uh, if I'm allowed to be myself, then you're going to get the best version of me. If you start controlling me and nitpicking and, you know, trying to pull the strings, it's not going to end well. It's not going to go
Yeah.
well for you. And that's where I'm like, okay, goodbye. So with my husband Jay, he's so like, I mean, a lot of nights I'm in my studio right now. I fall asleep on the couch right here. I mean, there I'm talking four nights out of the week I fall asleep right here on the couch because I say, it's 1 in the morning and I'm like, oh, I'll just take a little nap and then, I'll be fine. I'll be fine, and I'll wake up and I'll just keep going. And then I'm just like, and I used to be able to do that, but it's like since after 30, it's like, whew, it is not the same. So I mean, uh most nights I fall asleep here. He'll come in and he'll go, honey, do you want me to do you want me to pick you up and bring you into the bed or do you want to stay here? So I mean he gets it, and he got that early
Yeah.
on and I don't think he would have, him or any guy would have married me if they saw that, because there's and I'm not out, at the club drinking or, doing, going to, all these different things.
You're not
I
with your
used
groupies.
to. Yeah. I used to love, I used to love to go out a lot and that kind of got me in trouble a little bit, but I love being a homebody now. And I think Jay just instinctively knows like I'm here. I'm not, going out with, random strangers and going to bars and clubs and that sort of thing. So, it just works. And on the other hand, too, it's give and take because he gets up at work at 5 in the morning. He doesn't get home until 5 at night. So he works 12-hour days and he's tired when he gets home. And, I'm not like Susie housewife that's like, you know, oh, I prepared your dinner and your hot meal is on, on the plate. So I it's fun sometimes to do that if I want to, but he's not like, I expect that or anything. So it's give and take. It's about understanding your partner's needs. And that's any marriage, I think, is in any relationship for it to work, you have to understand, like you said, what makes that person tick, what drives them,
Yeah, yeah.
and you have to be supportive too. You have to be supportive.
It's like there's two types of people, to conclude this topic. It's like the one who will give up their dream for someone because that person doesn't get it. you see it happening a lot. They're like, okay, you know what? I want the other person on the other side who's like, okay, cool. I don't have to give up on this, but I also don't have to jump into a relationship straight away until I actually know this person actually gets it. And they actually need to give themselves time. Not jump into things because you just have to get it. I mean, the lesson to take away here is the person just has to get it.
You just have to get it. And you know what,
Yeah,
too?
you just have to get it.
Like you're saying that you have to understand who you're dating or who you're marrying, and they have to do the same with you. I was very honest with Jay from the beginning. I said, music was always my number one. When I was younger, I was bullied. Uh, so I came home from school looking forward to playing the piano, to writing music because it was my safe haven. It's like your friend, that's always there for you. So I said to him, I said, this music will always be with me. I'll always love to write, to produce, to perform. And he just got it. And it, that's it.
Even
He
with
got it.
music, it's
And
still dead to us part.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
Okay, one more question just to wrap up. I don't want to keep you. So just like something I've been bragging about a lot when it came to actually doing this podcast with you, you can just
Oh,
briefly take us through the whole Britney Spears experience. How did that happen?
yeah.
Like writing
So,
for her.
yeah. So it's interesting. That kind of experience, I produced Turn Me Up and Human Nature, which were two of my dance pop records that are on Spotify. Human Nature was originally written for Britney. That when my co-producer Jake Ciberon and I talked about stylistically where we were going to go with that, we said Britney Spears and Janet Jackson. That was kind of stylistically where we wanted to bring it. And at the time, the a manager I was working with had a connection with Larry Rudolph, who managed Britney at the time. And this was when she was working on material for her record Glory, I believe. So we did pitch the song for Britney. Ultimately, it was passed up by her label, and I don't think Larry was working with her at that time. So it did get passed up. But the cool thing was somehow it found its way to the Britney fan sites, which was so cool because they started posting on their sites and on their wiki pages and YouTube. So that was the coolest thing. And I just have to say, Britney Spears is like, I worship the ground she walks on. I think she's just the most incredible artist. I am like the biggest soldier for her. I think anytime anybody says anything negative about her, I'm like the first one to defend her. And I think she's another somebody who's kind of misunderstood, but she's so brilliant. I think she's a brilliant artist. I think I'm so glad that she's able to be free now and live her life. But that was just the experience to have her fans be so supportive. And I was tagged in a YouTube video, and I'm reading the comments from people, and it was just so sweet. And just, people, I love kind people. I really do, and I try to be kind to other people, because I believe what you put out there, you get back. So
Mm.
it was a really cool experience, but I am putting it out into the universe that when she is, if ever Brittany's re-recording or working on new music, I would be honored and I would love to write something for her and I would love or play something for her that I've already written. So, because she's
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
she's queen bee. She's queen bee. Her and Beyonce.
I think all artists, no matter what scale it's at, is misunderstood by the public.
Yes. Yeah.
Really misunderstood by the public. Like we quick to criticize, we're quick to be negative about a person or a situation. And what I feel is that when you have that sort of behavior, is that because you're actually unhappy with yourself. There's trauma
Yes.
inside of you. So you're just
100%.
pushing it out to other people. We don't have a right to judge anyone, why they've
No.
done what they've done, or not even knowing the full scale of the story, yet you're judging. We don't have that right.
You don't. And something I've learned through, being through an an experience of my own with the media is there's this need from certain, whether it's tabloids or these kind of, I call them rag mags, rag magazines. Their goal is to create a headline and to create a story that's going to interest people in reading. And their ability to craft a narrative from nothing is truly outstanding. And so, going back to the point you were saying that Adrian said, let's focus on the music because I am very much aware of that people are always going to speculate about people, about artists. I keep things about the music, and I do that for a lot of reasons, but mostly I do that because I believe that if you're an artist, and you're what you should seek to do is put out music. That should be it. You should use your art for a good cause, whether it's to promote whatever message you're trying to promote. If it's positive, put it in your music. I always say put everything in your music. Don't go to a tabloid and leak a story or it, that's not, and again, that's not what I'm a musician. I'm not, my goal is not to be a celebrity. That's not my goal. My goal is I'm a musician. I strive to be better at my craft every day. I practice hard. I've studied my whole life and I can stand on that foundation. So that's why I keep it about the music.
That's so powerful. I'm a musician. My goal is
Thank
not to
you.
be a celebrity. That there is so powerful.
Thank you.
Something that people, in the industry also, need to get. And if something you said at the start, which I agree with, uh, if your goal is to obtain money or fame, you're in it for the wrong reasons. Stop now.
Yes.
Be a
And you're not
hobby
going to get
musicianist
far.
because, yeah, you're not going to get far. You're not really going to get far. And we're living in this era as well. Like, I respect you when you say, I actually feel special that you opened up as well on the podcast, even though you want to keep it for the music. Like, even though, we want to keep it about the music, within the industry, we also live in this era where fans want to have an intimate relationship with you as well.
Yes.
So if you singing to me about a certain topic, have you lived that certain topic?
Yes.
And if you have lived a certain topic, I want you to tell me about it, like on a podcast, for example.
Yes.
We also live in that era. So it makes it sort of like complicated at times when you just want to keep it. And I get where agents come from.
And
Look,
I
you need to keep
think,
it to the
I think you have a great point. I think that's such an important thing when it's told. from your narrative as the artist. If I'm doing an interview and you're asking me, what is this song about? Who is it about? That's fine. But for a third party media outlet to speculate, to say things, that's complete, your fans want to have an intimate relationship with you. That's wonderful. That's great. What better source than the artists themselves to be able
Yeah.
to, to speak on that. And I would never say, oh, I won't talk about that or that as it relates to my music, because I am a very open book. And a lot of the songs, especially done back in 2017 when I was living in the recording studio, I'm very open about mental health, about the depression I was, going through at that time. And the music really reflects that. And it was very painful to listen to the records when I got them back. It was it was very painful because there was a lot of sadness. There's a record I released called Black and Blue, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so deeply personal when you listen to the lyrics, because I'm saying this statement of or posing a question. Ain't it kind of funny, a life that never made much sense? It's like this sad reality that only people that have suffered through depression will understand, that it's like kind of like this sick joke. It's like, why me? Why is this happening? I don't understand it. That was the way I knew how to deal with it at that time, was to put my energy and my feelings through the music, because I was able to channel it and essentially get it off my chest, release it into the world, and it helped. It really did help in a lot of ways. But yeah, those records are deeply personal. And then then I have like fun songs like Turn Me Up and Human Nature that are just like really fun to listen to. And I love that because there's something that everybody can pull from. There's dance records people could put on when they want to dance, and um, there's ballads and stuff. And I've written two records for an artist. Her name is Mila Jam. She's a wonderful artist, and she recorded two songs that I wrote. The first one being it's called Glass Castles, and it's a ballad. Another one, it's a beautiful power ballad based on the book by Jeanette Walls, but it's also, in a sense, about breaking down barriers and being true to who you are, understanding who you are, and the walls that we put up around ourselves. This that we build this fake facade around us, this glass castle around us, and we have to knock it down in order to be authentic. And that's really hard. That's really hard. But then, and then it's funny because the other song that I wrote, that um, I co-wrote this song with my friend Nick Larson, and it's called Sex Game. And it's very much, it sounds a lot like the Weekend. Like, it has that very R&B driven pop club mixture, and they did such a phenomenal job on the production of it. It's just very cool to hear other artists when they record this, your songs. I think it's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And create remixes along the way.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. There's actually there's someone, if you don't mind, I want to put you in touch with him. It was actually the guest that I had last night, Dr. Diane Kaufman. So she
It's
has an
so
organization.
funny that you say
Yeah.
that because I saw your post, and I saw her, and something like in me, ri- I can't explain it. I know people call me crazy, but I have these like divine things. And I felt this
Spiritual.
like spiritual connection to her. And I've obviously never met her, but I haven't gotten a chance to hear the show. But
Oh,
I
it's not
just,
up yet. It's not up yet. So it'll be up like early this week and then followed by yours. So,
oh, okay. Well,
magical how the universe works, because all that you've been speaking about and your journey, your life, and touching on the issues of depression, anxiety, is what her organization is all about. Uh, being an activist for suicide prevention. So I feel like, given your mandate and your purpose and what you hope to achieve as well, like linking up with her, would be really cool. So she's looking for artists who want to create compositions with visuals that they can upload on their pages. It actually helps. So what she does is she uses art as a form to actually prevent, people from committing suicide. Like, there is a way out of it. You don't have to do it. So she uses her art to actually, get that message out.
that's incredible.
Yeah,
That's
I can
so
send you the
powerful.
contact details via Adrian, and then you can reach out to her. And also, one of the so we concluded with, I don't want our discussions to just be like, okay, cool, this is it. You said your story. That's where we leave it. And that's where we end our relationship. So the idea that I actually passed to us, because the presence will now be in South Africa, and she has a presence in Australia and the UK, is to just create separate Facebook pages for these reasons. Sorry, for these regions. So there'll be her organization, South Africa, the Hold On campaign, South Africa, the Hold On campaign, Australia, and then the UK. And that's how you spread, the mandate across the globe to just hold on, because suicide is just out of control.
It's out of control, and it's such an issue, and I'm a huge advocate for, like I had mentioned, for mental health awareness, advocacy, because people the more people have that conversation and start that conversation, the more people feel that they're able to talk about it and understand that it's way more common than people think. When you speak to people, when I tell you I've spoken to so many people that have at least thought about it, it is it's so saddening and heartbreaking and so necessary that we have this conversation because back in the day, it was so hush hush, right? Your grandparents would tell you stories that nobody ever talked about this stuff, and everything was kept quiet. It can't be like that anymore. It's a different world. We have to talk about it. We
Yeah.
have to say there are resources out there. It does get better. It's gonna be okay. I know it feels like your world is ending now, and I've been there. I've been there where I felt like there is no hope. Te Here I am, 10 years later, happily married with a cat and a dog who I love, in a happy life. And believe me when I tell you I was low. And so it's so important to tell people this is not the end, this is temporary. And also, we at bringing those resources for mental health to underprivileged communities is also a huge factor because those communities don't have the same level of medical care and access as those with greater financial resources.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
100%.
and you know what? I always say depression doesn't discriminate. Everybody and anybody could face depression. And like you said, it's such a big, it's like it feels like an outbreak. But
Yeah,
we have
yeah,
we have one thing I'll kind of end with is I always say, and there's there's that famous quote, be kind, for everyone you know is facing a battle you know nothing about. And it's so true. When
yeah.
you see somebody who's at the coffee store, at the grocery store, at the gas station, that's rude to you, or they're nasty or whatever, don't engage. Try to be kind back to them because it they might be going through the worst possible thing you can't imagine, and it's not an excuse for them to act like that, but when you're kind in return, you clear your side of the street and your karma,
It's good.
and that's it. You walk away and you say, I did all that I could do, and you raise your own level of frequency by doing that.
Yeah, it's like being kind to that person who shouted, you will like psychologically mess with them.
It
Like, why is
does.
she being kind to me? I just shouted at her. Like, why should be?
Yes,
And then that person will actually like reflect on their own life. Maybe I'm
they
looking
do.
at all this the wrong way. Maybe
And
there is good people out
it's
there who's
funny,
kind.
they'll change their tone of voice
Yeah,
when they respond. No, try it. Like I always say to people, I say it's like a little challenge. If somebody's ever, rude to you, be super kind to them back. And then you'll see their reaction is always changes to being super, super nice. So we have to just inspire that train of kindness and positivity, and I'm all about that. So,
nice, nice, nice. Okay, so I'm
yeah,
definitely going to hook you up with those details. And
please.
down the line, yeah, as I said, this doesn't have to be like a WhatsApp, like sorry, I was about to say WhatsApp. It doesn't have to be a once off. Down the line, we'll hook up again, have another chat, see where you're at, only, doing all this humanitarian work. We take it from there. But thank you so much for taking the
Absolutely.
time to actually come
Thank
on.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you so
This
much, Kino, for
this
having
was
me
a pleasure.
on your show, and this was so wonderful.
It was enjoyable. And it was fun and
Yes,
organic. And that's what I'm trying to push out. Like, there's so many podcasts out there and podcasters out there that want to perfect. And you can actually see it in their content and the video, how many edits they actually make. Yet with me, we've recorded for 2 hours, 24 minutes as we stand. I want to push out 2 hours, 24 minutes. I want to
yes,
get people to understand that we are humans. Just
yes,
because we are artists and we're doing podcasts and so on, don't put us on a pedestal. We are just like you. And just like how we
yes,
have chased our dreams, you can as well. I want you to see the fun that we have, the laughter that we have, the serious chats that we have, the mistakes that we make because we're human. So just be like sometimes we look at people who, okay, maybe people look at Zoey Tess and they call, even though you don't consider or look at yourself as a celebrity, other people may look at you as a celebrity and they may think, okay, Zoe Tess doesn't make mistakes. How can I ever be like her? Because I have been making so many mistakes in my life. But then when they see you actually making the same mistakes they do, it gives them that push, that motivation. And that's what I want like the audience
absolutely.
of this podcast to actually, get like just keep it
That's
organic and real.
perfect.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what? It's so true because none of us are perfect. And I always say too, people only post the best moments on social media. So when you see
Mm.
people that are happy and all the time, there's nobody that's happy all the time. There's nobody that's perfect, you know? Like I always tell it's so funny. I always tell people, I'm like, I wish you could see my hair in the morning. I wish you could see like, it's like crazy. And when people think like, oh, this person's so put together, it's like, listen, it takes a lot of work, to get there. So uh it and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it's just, nobody's perfect. We're all very flawed people, and so
Yeah, I mean, the last lesson to end with is also understanding vanity metrics and understanding
mm,
how to keep like a 50% balance between being organic and being on social media. Because if you're an artist and you aiming to get 10,000 views or 10,000 likes, because that's going to define your success, you're going about the wrong way. Because 10,000 views or 10,000 likes doesn't mean you're going to get 10,000 streams or you're going to get 10,000 endorsement deals. It's not how it works. So for the
no,
artists, just like myself and you, who don't focus on vanity metrics, yet we're still successful in our own right, speaks volumes. Speaks volumes. There are artists who are killing it, like with their music, and they're not even on social media. So it's also something that I try to push out. Get out of that bubble, because if you're gonna get more and more consumed with that bubble, when that bubble does pop, you're not gonna be able to deal with reality.
absolutely. And that's not reality, what's online. So
Yeah,
you're right.
it's not.
You have to live for the moment, live for yourself, and live for the people around you because that's reality. Those are things you can, that are tangible. And
Yeah.
and we'll leave with that.
But, thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of your day.
You
I will send you the
too.
details, and yeah, we will definitely touch base and chat again soon. And then
Awesome.
I'll
I'm
send through all
so
the
looking
links.
forward to it.
Yeah, and I'll send through all the links once it's uploaded on YouTube and on Spotify.
Thank you so much
Hey,
for
thank you.
everything.
No problem, and keep doing what you do. Keep
Thank you
doing
so
what you do.
much, Kino. You too.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Okay,
have a great
okay.
day.
Bye. You too.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.